This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 4. Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers, with your host Ramzi Marjaba. Did you know that Mother's Day in Lebanon is celebrated on March 21st? This means that Ramzi has to keep up with not one, but two Mother's Day celebrations.
Hello, all you beautiful SEs. Thank you for joining me again, and happy Mother's Day. I know we're one day late, and I would say it's better late than never, but I don't think it's true when it comes to Mother's Day, because late is like nothing at all. Today's conversation is with Anum Faizan. He is new to the SE role. He's been there for a couple of years, so new-ish. And it was great talking to him, get his insight about being an SE. His role is fairly different than mine in the sense that it's more like inside sales engineer, where he doesn't go visit customers for the SE role, although he does for the other role he's in. So it was interesting for me to learn that, and if any of you guys are inside SEs, it's good for you guys to know the difference between being an inside SE and regular SE, I would say. I really enjoyed my conversation with Anum, as I've mentioned. We discussed a lot of topics, including overcoming your fears, which helped him become an SE. So let's dig into that. And without further ado, here's Anum Faizan. Hey Anum, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ramsey. So thanks for the invite.
Anytime, man. I appreciate you taking it. So we've never met, just so everybody on the who's listening to the podcast knows. So far, everybody I've interviewed, I've met before, and I was able to get them. You're the first one who I actually reached out to, and you said yes without any reservations. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. It sounded like an interesting concept, so I thought, why not contribute?
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it, and hopefully whoever's listening appreciates it as well. So maybe we can get started with an introduction from you about who you are, what you do, and your career path, I guess, to get to this role.
Sounds good. So I was actually a computer science graduate from Carleton. And then I worked, did a few co-ops, including Mitel and Bridgewater Systems, which is MDOTS now in the Ottawa area. And so I was in development. My first job was also as a software developer at IBM in their Cognos division for a number of years. And then I was an automation developer for a year in my current company, which is Rogrip Software. And then I switched to the sales engineering role, in which I've been for the last 2 years. And that's what I do right now.
Nice. So how did you go from being someone who doesn't really interact with customers to a sales engineer? That's not usually a path that I've seen a lot of people take.
Yeah, so it actually just came to me. I was playing a foosball game with our VP of technical sales, and he said, hey, there's a position that's opening up, and I think you'd be interested in it. I was reporting directly to him, and I actually had reservations at the time just because I hadn't really done it. And I wasn't sure if, going from writing code all day to being in front of customers all day is a really big change. So, but I had been working in my free time to develop more social skills. I had been going to Toastmasters for a number of years at that point. It was something that I really wanted to develop. So when the opportunity popped up, I was like, okay, so this is kind of like jumping in the deep end right away, but it was aligning with what I had already been working towards in my free time.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I went for it. And it kind of just came out of a random personal connection. I wasn't seeking it out or anything.
Nice. I'm curious, how much did Toastmasters actually help you?
A lot. Yeah. So I actually had a severe fear of public speaking my whole life. I would say I actually ended up in computer science because I didn't have to do presentations in high school. In computer classes. And I knew that other measures that honestly that it had that big of an impact. Of course, that's not why I continued with it, but that was then a personal goal for me to get over it. So that's really why I got into Toastmasters. I was like, I really got to do something to get over it. It's a big part of life. I shouldn't have something that's terrifying me to this degree on an every day. So if I hadn't done it, there was no way in hell I was going down this route.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's good to hear. I'm glad you were able to get over your fear. And were you planning on doing Toastmasters just so you'd move into a sales position or sales engineer position, or is it something that you just did and then it ended up helping you once a position opened or once?
Yeah, so not at all. The reason I went to Toastmasters was just to conquer the fear just enough so that the occasional meeting I had to do wouldn't bother me so much. Um, so I went in there just from a purely personal development standpoint. Never thought it would help me in my career, actually, because there's just not much of it there, and I didn't really want to go there either. But then it just happened to um, help me with this new opportunity.
And no one actually asked you to go do it. This is something you took initiative.
Oh yeah, I started doing Toastmasters years before I actually made this move.
Nice. Cool. So you've been in the sales engineer for 2 years, right?
Right.
And from what I understand from your company, which by the way, this is your opinions, not the company's opinions, correct?
Of course.
Your opinions do not reflect whatever your company thinks. I think that's a legal terminology. Not really, but okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what have been your roles and responsibilities in your new role?
So the bulk of my role is pre-sales, where I am doing demos of our product. So it's a static code analysis tool that I'm a sales engineer for, Clockwork. Many would have heard of it. And the bulk of my responsibilities are doing demos using my own data and open source data to demonstrate to customers how it works and why it would help them and address their use cases and actually convince them on the value of the product. And then if they like it, then it goes forward to actually doing a proof of concept using their own data, which is, of course, that much more convincing. And then supporting them throughout this entire process. So we actually do a mini deployment as part of this on their own machines, run them through an analysis, and then convince them using what we find of the value that the tool can provide. So that's majority of it. I also do a little bit of professional services as part of the role, which includes actually working with customers after they have bought to get them trained and then get their actual deployment working, and custom services as well.
How long is your sales cycle usually?
So it varies. I would say at a minimum of about, I think the fastest I would have seen would be a month, usually around 2 months, and some can go as long as 6 months.
Okay, so within 1 or 2 months, you can actually do a demo, then go to a POC and then sell it, or you skip steps?
So I'm thinking of from the point that I start talking to the customer to the point that they have mainly made their, we have received the PO.
Okay.
Yeah. So usually my demos are something like an hour, and POC is something like 2 hours. But then there's lots of follow-up meetings for all the things that come up or the different use cases that people want to cover.
Okay. And do you generally work with account manager or sales manager?
There's usually account exec or there's usually a specific exec who's been assigned an opportunity and working with.
Okay. So at what point do you get involved in a sale?
Typically, the demo. So the first time they do a demo, the salespeople will usually do a little pitch, and then I take over from where it comes to actually showing the tool, and then the POC and forward is all mine.
So is that in the same meeting, like in the first meeting, he does the pitch and then you do a demo, or does he gather information for you and then give you the information to do the demo later?
Usually, so the sales reps would usually do some due diligence before of qualifying, making sure that it's somewhat of a good match, so that it's actually worth doing a demo. So
Oh,
they call it a discovery call. So all that happens before I get involved.
so you're not involved in the discovery. You're involved when like there's actual opportunity there.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes if someone new or if they have indicated from their initial emails if the discovery is going to be very technical, sales reps will invite me to that as well. But usually, it's the demo is when I get involved.
Okay. For I guess for us it's a little bit different. We're very involved in the discovery, and from what I like the people I've talked to on different occasions, uh, we're involved. SEs are usually involved in the discovery because it gets fairly technical. That the sales guy doesn't really get all the information properly.
Right. So we have that as well. So what we have done is we have distilled it down to a very specific list of questions. As long as you can get that, like there's a bunch of yes or no questions that they can use to at least map it out. If it's an opportunity or not. Like for example, if the languages they're using are not even covered by our tool, that's a simple enough thing that the sales rep can do.
Right.
So they will just do those very basic questions, but as soon as it starts getting to customers asking questions, then of course you need a technical resource.
Okay. And is it? Do you work with just one account executive, or are you a shared resource?
I'm a shared resource, so I work with many. I would say about 5 to 10.
5 to 10. So I work one on one. I have one sales guy. He kind of owns my time, or we kind of figure out my time together. And I'm always curious when it comes to having one SE for more than one account executive. How does the time? How do they share your time? How do you schedule?
So that's a good question, and I think this might be. I think we probably need a better SC2 sales ratio. So usually they will book the meeting. So they will send me an invite based on whatever availability is in my calendar, and then I can accept it based on when it's a good time for me. But that worked well when the ratio is good. But of course, as the ratio changes, if someone leaves or whatever, that can start getting into a very busy time.
Okay. From my experience, usually account executives want everything right now. So,
Well, of course, because from their perspective, they just need help. They don't really care who does it, right?
yeah.
Uh,
So, so
so
go ahead.
yeah, I think that's kind of left up in the air, and it's left up to the sales engineer to manage that.
So you get to prioritize which opportunity takes more of your time.
Right. Yeah. So I can. I mean, I can say that. Okay, I'm taking. You have to go to another SE if something is if it's getting out of.
Okay. So there is help. They provide you help by
Yeah.
having
So it's a
other.
team effort. If somebody's getting too busy, you can. There are other SEs. So there we have several ones in the region. You can try to offload, but it's left up to me to do that delegation.
Okay. So you're basically a shared resource among other SEs. It's not like you are the only one serving 10, but
No, no, no.
yeah.
There is others. So yeah, I will send it their way as appropriate.
Okay. And do you have product managers as well?
We do.
Okay, so I'm curious how is your relationship with them, and how did you develop like how do you get them to do something that you need them to do?
So usually, product managers will focus more on things that will apply to the product overall, not as specific to a customer. So if it's anything, it's a specific question that just only applies to that, then I will try to tackle it. But if it comes to specific product knowledge or future roadmap kind of questions, um, then I will go to the product manager. Does that?
Yeah. Well, basically, I'm trying to see at what point do you get them involved in the sale, or do you always tackle everything yourself and you ask them questions as you go along? How
I
how do you
try.
involve them?
Yeah, no, good question. I try to tackle as much as possible because there's much fewer of them and they have a lot more responsibility in terms of product decided direction, pricing, all that. So any customer inquiries, I try to resolve them myself. If I don't have an answer, it requires internal knowledge that's not available. Um, or if the questions are going in a territory of what are our future plans, which I cannot answer, that is when I'll go to the product manager.
Okay. And do you visit customers? Do you go on site to see customers, or is it just at home?
I do occasionally very large customers. Sometimes they invite us to um, meet with them to discuss their future plans or deployments. More happens on the post sales side, but a lot of my work is remote. A lot of the training also can be done remote.
Okay. So, how do you develop that relationship with the customer if you're remote, or is that just solely the responsibility of the account executive?
That relationship building type of stuff, yeah, that mostly goes on the account executive. I mean, you end up developing somewhat of a relationship just because of the back and forth that happens all the time on the technical end, but I don't put any specific effort into it.
Okay. All right. So, is it more like of an inside SE type role? You don't have to go visit customers. You can just be at home and
Well, yeah, our office is in Ottawa, so mostly in the office. Um, yeah, you could do most of my role remotely. There is some traveling, so conferences or sometimes customers like large customer we will visit them, but it's not the norm.
okay. And so I'm assuming you have other SEs around you here in the office in Ottawa.
We do have one who trained me, but mostly they're distributed all around the globe to cover as much of it as possible.
Okay. So this brings up a question. So I have this issue, or not issue, it's just a situation where I'm kind of remote. I'm the only one in Ottawa. There are different people in different areas. Um, how did you build? Did you build a camaraderie with your other teammates, like in case you need help, like so that they'd be able to help you? And did you do that?
How do I build relationships with the other team, you mean?
Yeah, with your team members. Like, let's say you need help with something. Like, is it just as easy as emailing somebody and asking for help, or like, is there? How did you develop that relationship with your colleagues?
Yeah, so our team is pretty good at responding to emails or like internal tickets as well. Like I have access to, of course, the entire internal system. So if I have anything, I can just create. But as you know, you can use much higher quality and faster if you are in there in person. So one big advantage I had is that I was part of R&D because I was working in an automation role in this company before. So I already knew a lot of the people. I'd worked with them for a year in different teams. So I already had a lot of pre-built relationships I could rely on. So I've just continued them.
Okay. So would you be able to share like a day or a week in your life, whichever you think is more interesting, like what you do on a daily basis?
Sure. So usually, like I said, I get meeting requests from account execs for either demos or POCs, or sometimes for calls on meeting with existing customers, are focused around renewals. So I usually have 1 to 2 meetings a day that are client facing, um, and during those, there's usually some prep time. I'm getting my environment set up or brushing up on the types of things that we're going to be using if you're going to be doing a deployment on their end. Um, and then there's almost always some follow-up. So if new questions came up that they needed external information for, links or how-tos, or specific technical issues, or what kinds of things we could detect, for example. So I'll send those follow-up questions. I'll do a little bit of research and send those replies afterwards. That is, from a customer-facing perspective, that is what takes the majority of the time. Then there's also meetings that I would book with customers, usually the post-sales ones, where I will work with them for if they need training, or sometimes if there's deliveries around services. So if you have to deliver something by a certain date, then I'll block off some time on the calendar to work on those.
Okay. And you mentioned like you get requests from customers, questions, and that sort of thing. How do you keep track of all the questions that are being asked to make sure that you respond in timely fashion?
No official way. I just usually prioritize customer questions above everything else, because they're, especially in pre-sales, which is the majority of my work, the faster they get the responses, the better their perception is. So usually I try to get to them ASAP, or get whoever involved that I need to. So no official way. They're just at the top of my inbox. I work at them until they're gone.
Okay, so you kind of like mark it as unread and go back to it just to make sure you answered the question.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I was asking is sometimes you don't know the answer and you have to ask somebody else and then make sure that you get the answer from that person to send it to the customer. And that's when I find most of the time things get lost, just because.
Yeah, so I do. I guess so. This comes to how I organize my daily work. So I usually keep like a notebook, and then every day I will add a number of to do. So as soon as I get like a to do, I just put it in there, and then I keep checking it off as I do things. So if something comes in that I can't handle right away, it will probably get added in there, and then I will have it there till it's gone.
Okay. So I noticed I found you on LinkedIn, obviously, and I'm kind of curious. Do you think SEs should be marketing or advertising their products, or is that something you don't like doing?
Advertising their products. So you mean generating content, or actively doing it in person?
Not necessarily generating content, but if if there is some information about, like, your product manager put up some information, do you share that? Do you like it? Do you comment on it? How have you done anything like that? I personally haven't. So,
On social media?
on LinkedIn at least.
Um, I haven't done too much of it. Maybe I should, but I find that I only comment on things that I truly find interesting. And what are the chances that they're going to have to do my product?
Okay.
So I'm not very active on social media, as this hasn't really been. I don't think I've ever shared anything actually on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, as of late, I've just started liking stuff that my company does. I don't know what reach it does. I don't know if it has any effect on anything. So, like, yeah, I'm just trying to learn a little bit more about that. Curious about that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess I don't remember someone ever commenting anything about their product that I truly found interesting out of all my connections. Okay, maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't say this here. So I don't know how effective that stuff is, and I just don't feel true to myself doing that.
Okay. No, that's fair. Like, kind of, we work with customers, so it is important that we kind of believe in what we're doing.
Oh no, I fully believe in the product. It's just that of the comment and of the content coming out, how
Yeah.
often is it exactly the thing that I want to say? Almost never.
Yeah. I'm not saying you don't believe in the content. I'm saying, like, if you don't feel comfortable just liking something on LinkedIn and it makes you feel weird, then why do it? Why go through that? Because very likely your customer kind of feels weird seeing you like stuff that's your stuff, obviously.
Right. So if I saw, maybe it's because there isn't that much of a. If I really saw like mind-blowingly good content, then of course I would do it. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Awesome. So I have like I call it a not so fire round, which is basically a couple of questions which you can like they're asked in succession and you can take your time answering them. They're usually not that long.
Sounds good.
All right. So you mentioned you use a notebook and a pen to write down your to-do list.
No, no. I actually use Google Notebook because you can just access it from anywhere, and I always keep track of it. So I keep the latest day for each day. I will put a few
Okay.
items in there.
That's fair. So other than that, is there another tool that you think is essential for an SE?
Um, other tool. The tools are specific to what I do. Um, there are some screen capturing tools. There's one just expired. I had it. They're really good for capturing while you're doing some screen. So if you want to explain to a customer how to do a certain task, often describing it in words is very difficult. So way to just capture movement, and I mean there's lots of tools that fall under that, but having some way to make screen capture videos or annotated screenshots really helps.
Okay. Yeah, I use screenshots all the time. Like I use the snipping tool that's on Windows.
Yeah, that's what I've downgraded to, but there's some other. I this, the name is escaping my mind. There are some other tools where you can actually record movement as well, so you can just say, okay, capture the screen and just capture this window or the actions that I'm doing.
Huh.
So if some action is requiring several steps, that's a quick way to catch it.
Okay.
But other than that, yeah, I will just use the Windows snipping tool. Is pretty good as well.
Well, if you ever find that name, do you mind sending that to me? I can put it on the show notes. It'll be show 4 of this podcast, and people can find it there.
For sure.
Right? Is there a book or a podcast or an online resource that every SE should be looking at or reading?
Every time I have questions, I end up just using Google or Reddit. There's a sales engineering subreddit as well, but it's not as active as I would like it to be. So I mean, that is partly why I agreed. I just don't know enough good resources for this stuff.
Okay, so yeah, actually, there's a Reddit sub forum for SEs.
Yeah, there's a sales engineering subreddit.
Okay, I did not know that. That's good. I'll make sure to add it here. Any tips and tricks for time management and task organization? I think you already answered that one, sort of.
Time management. Well, so because a lot of it heavily depends on the calendar in my role, a lot of it has to do with actually, if you know you have to do long-term commitments, it's often easy to get caught up in the reactive work to book that in. So you have to deliver some services, or if you have any other that are you have already committed to, you've got to make sure to assign time to it. Otherwise, you will be drowned out with reactive work and never get those long-term tasks in. Other than that, also, it's important to be aware of how much follow-up there is. Because it's easy to see a meeting as just a meeting, but you don't realize that all the time that you have to spend on providing quality follow-up for the things that came up or debugging to answer questions. So being aware of that and scheduling appropriately is very important.
Okay, so time blocking. Have you ever read a book called The One Thing?
I have not.
Okay, well, it's written by Gary Keller, who's real estate oriented, but it's all about like blocking time, which is what basically you mentioned. So you didn't really write a book about it, but you're pretty much doing it.
Huh. Yeah, I learned it the hard way.
Don't we all?
So, what is the premise of the book?
It's about basically being efficient at work and time management. Make sure that you block your time on your calendar for the most important things first, and just protect it with your life, basically. And
That
it's a very good book.
I'm gonna read it. So you said one thing?
Yeah, The One Thing by Gary Keller. I'm gonna put a link to it on the show notes. So show 4, and people can see it can reach it from there.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'll definitely follow up. Hopefully it's on Audible.
It is. That's how I listen to it on Audible, pretty much.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing I found. Reading, you almost never have time if your role is busy enough. So I usually listen on my way to work.
Yeah, no, and that's another time management tip. Listen to stuff in the car instead of music. Music is fun, but if you can just listen to things in the car, that will add value to your day.
Yeah, actually makes the drive a lot more enjoyable too.
I kind of look forward for traffic. Not that we have a lot of traffic in Ottawa, but
I don't know if traffic. I have a manual car, so the stopping is not so enjoyable.
I sold my manual car when I started hitting traffic. All right, last question for you. What advice would you give SEs that you feel they never get from anybody else? Other than listening to this podcast, obviously.
What advice? I think your last question was already touching on it, is that you got to manage your time. And this is one of those roles where there is no manager. They're managing specifically your tasks or dividing out the workload. If you keep taking on more workload, it is going to get out of control. So it's up to you to aggressively manage your time so that you could deliver on all things that you want, as well as have your reasonable quality of life.
Awesome, man. So where can people find out more about you? Can I put your LinkedIn in the show notes?
Sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today out of the blue. I really appreciate that. It's very courageous of you.
Yeah, why not? And thanks for taking the initiative to do this again. I am actually going to start following this just to hear what other kinds of SEs are doing, because these are things you don't really find out till you're several years into a certain kind of role. So
yeah, and every different, you do it one way. Most of my customers are in Ottawa, so I'm in the car visiting people. So it's kind of quite different to hear that, okay, you're able to actually sit in the office all day, and I don't know if I'd be able to do that, right? And it's good for people to understand that there's different types of SEs, right? People who go out and people who stay in. So, all right, man. Well, again, I appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too, man. See ya. This was my conversation with Anum. I really enjoyed it, and hope you guys enjoyed it too. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode, and I hope you got something from it. I really liked how he had a fear of speaking in public, and he actually did something about it. He went to Toastmasters. We all have something that we need to work on. So what is it that you guys need to work on? I know what I need to work on. There's a lot of things, actually, that I need to work on. And I'm taking it bit by bit. Hopefully you guys are as well. If you'd like to share what you're working on, please leave it in the comments. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. Leave a rating or review if you guys don't mind. If you enjoyed it, let it be an honest one. I'd love to work on my weaknesses, even on the podcast. And I have one ask of you guys, which I did last week. I would like for you to just tell one colleague about this show, especially if you find it will be useful. If you don't find it useful, please let me know what you would want to hear on such a podcast, and I'd love to make it for you. If you'd like to be interviewed on the show, please send me an email at Ramzi, RAMZI, or ZI if you're in the US, at wethesalesengineers.com. Or you can go to the contact page at wethesEs.com and click on the Contacts tab. For the show notes, you can get them from wethesalesengineers.com/show4, and you'll get all the links there if you'd like to get something off of Amazon or learn more about Toastmasters or any of the other links that he mentioned on the show. Thank you guys for listening, and this is Ramsey signing off.